Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public board meeting of School District 72 Campbell River for this June 20th, 2023. I'd like to apologize for a short delay in starting this evening. We had a very full agenda in the confidential meeting, and we all needed a little bit of break between meetings. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Campbell River Board of Education and this meeting is taking place on the traditional territories of the Lekwitchuk people. Please note that there is a short production delay between the live event that you're reviewing and the meeting participants. The question and answer function is open for questions on agenda items throughout this virtual meeting, and a final call for questions will be made after the last agenda item, and the questions will be addressed before the end of the session. This evening, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st. I'd also like to highlight that there are community events happening tomorrow. They start tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the Bakehouse. The Bakehouse is always an amazing experience, so if you've never been there, please participate in the events. It's an incredible way to celebrate alongside Indigenous community. The meeting begins at 10 a.m. at the Bakehouse. There will be a community walk to the Spirit Square where lunch will be served, and activities will continue throughout the day until about 4 o'clock. This past Saturday, I attended the 2023 Carey High grad class celebrations in Robert Osler Park. Anyone who's ever had kids graduate from the SD72 Campbell River system realize that this is a trend. It happens every year. And as I was there to celebrate my own son's graduation. I'm very proud of him. But I also spent some time reflecting on what an honor it is to be gifted the opportunity to walk alongside children for 13 years of their educational experience. I watched this as educators high-fived their students and chatted proudly with parents about the accomplishments and unique traits. I just want to highlight that educators play such an important role for kids. Not only do they provide learning opportunities, but as professional, safe adults, they create connection points. They tirelessly encourage, and I got some of those emails from those grade 12 teachers. He needs to hand that in. And lend a sympathetic ear to the students as they navigate their growing into being an adult. The reward for this work is the opportunity to walk alongside families as their children begin the process of becoming engaged community members of our next generation. As we convene for the last public meeting of the 2022-23 school year, I would like to acknowledge our parents, caregivers, community stakeholders, staff, and board for their commitment to the children of SD72 Campbell River and for their support of the K-12 public education system in British Columbia. On to Superintendent's remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Eddie. I think after such a heartfelt welcome and comments, all I would like to say is ditto tonight. But I do want to echo certainly and share in some of those sentiments. This June marks the last of my own children graduating from our system and having the privilege of being there both, I'm sure for you as board chair to witness on everybody else's behalf and your own child. And I've had the luxury of that opportunity. You know, what I am proud to say as a superintendent, I believe so strongly in what happens in our schools in Campbell River. I have 2 of my 3 children spend every single one of their K-12 years in the Campbell River School District. Has been such a pleasure and such a gift. You know, I've also had the opportunity to reflect. I've been at so many events and we're not done. There's still so many celebrations that are coming where we get to celebrate the growth of our students and their successes. It certainly is an opportunity when you're there as superintendent to also acknowledge the efforts and dedication and commitment of staff who are there often in the evening, making sure that they are there, as you say, high-fiving verbally as they celebrate student accomplishments, and certainly they're they're supporting those students. I just think it's important to know, people often wonder what the superintendent does other than calling snow days. But I just want to share that the greatest privilege is to be in a position where you get to bear witness to the amazing miracle of what takes place every day in our schools. And so I would just like to claim with everybody listening, and I do think I have the best job in the world. It's a job where we also get to see and appreciate the trust that is placed in us in the education of your children. And we're so grateful for that. It's a gift to us as educators to be able to walk alongside and watch those little boys and little girls that come to us in kindergarten leave as young men and young women equipped to take on their next challenges. I do also acknowledge that this is a time of year where we do emphasize the accomplishments of our grade 12s and really want to ensure that this milestone is marked in a good way. And it's also a difficult time for some of our students, and acknowledge that our grade 5s are transitioning to a new school as well as our grade 8s. And I'm grateful with the absence of some of those COVID protocols that we're back to some of those transition activities, but I also acknowledge that there are some families and students that may require additional supports. So you're certainly welcome to connect with your new school for additional supports that they're required. And I'm particularly excited to welcome our new kindergarten. I know that's a big transition for parents, particularly if it's their first child, and we are excited about that. So there's just a few days of this school year left. I think there's lots of opportunity to reflect on what a great year it is, but certainly already I'm excited about our next school year. So again, just the privilege of being in a position to bear witness to the accomplishments of our students and the commitment and dedication of staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Morrow. On to item number 3, which are the approval of the minutes of the meeting of May 30th, 2023, and that the meetings of the May 30th, 2023 are hereby approved as circulated. So moved by Trustee Harper, seconder. Trustee Briggs, all those in favor? So moved. Are there any additions or alterations to the agenda? Seeing none, moving on onto approval of the agenda, that the agenda is hereby approved as circulated. Trustee Gillis, Trustee Briggs, all those in favor? And on to Vice Chair Gillis for the report of the board decisions from June 20th, 2023.
Yes, we dealt with others dealing with teaching, administrative and support staff changes, and property, legal, and financial issues.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. On to number 8, which is correspondence. I would like to acknowledge receipt of correspondence to the board by email from Vanessa Weber McLean, dated Friday, May 26th. And I would also further like to acknowledge receipt of correspondence to the board by email from Lucas Schuller, dated Monday, June 19th. Seeing no public submissions, no agenda submissions, we're down to educational submissions, which is an Indigenous education update with Deb Martel and her wondrous departmental staff.
We get to do the work first. So now you know who we are. We're a few members of I think one of the most important teams in the school district, but maybe I'm a little biased, but I've got 2 members here with me of our Indigenous Ed department. Again, I just want to also acknowledge when everything that we do, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a good way. We take guidance from those that have lived and grown on this unceded territory, the Liquido people, but we also recognize that our schools spread out quite a bit. So we have, we're on the Hanoko territory, Puglis and Comox territory. And every day we're very grateful that our work centers around all of the children and families within our schools who self-identify as Indigenous, but also the families in Campbell River as a whole, because we have a responsibility to ensure everyone understands all parts of Indigenous education. So I'll just get into a couple of quick things. So who we are. As I mentioned, I think we're an amazing group of people who keep Indigenous students at the center of our work. Within our staff, we have Indigenous education youth workers, educational assistants, language and culture teachers, career transition teachers, cultural resource and programming teacher, resource teachers, much like the LST. And then I've noted that we have English language teachers. I oversee the English language learning department as well. Many of them play a vital role working with Indigenous students, supporting literacy proficiency skills, as well. There's me, and I can't do without my admin assistant. Every one of these individuals, there's 41 in our department, amazing people to work with. And I think some of it, like I mentioned, some of the most important work that we do. Very quickly, what we do as a department, we work under the Indigenous education and English language learning. We have targeted funds, but we also get supported by the core funding through a small, shouldn't say small, it's a TRC budget that we work through, as well as a knowledge keeper budget. We provide service and we track progress and create opportunities and interest for those who self-identify as having Indigenous ancestry. We increase knowledge, awareness, and ability for our own Indigenous ed staff and ELL staff to be able to meet the needs of the students. And we focus everything we do through connection and engagement and through an equity lens. We work collaboratively to support the district to enhance all staff knowledge, awareness, and ability to fully implement the strategic priorities, the equity and action commitments, Standard 9, as I'm sure all of you are aware of now, Truth and Reconciliation's calls to action, and the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. And we work collectively as a team and amongst everyone in the school district to strengthen our relationships and connection to the local Indigenous communities. So when I mention our work has been through an equity lens, you can see in these 4 pillars, you have the learning profile, pedagogical core, learning profile, policy, and governance. In this, around the outer circle, you'll see some areas for us to have specific attention to. So anything that we do, we make sure that we're watching for the bias or the privilege that might not afford an Indigenous student their equitable access. We have to make sure that all of us have the highest expectations for all students. The confidence, we connect with confident learners and seeing that a sense of belonging. So within that category, again, the things that we're doing, we're supporting the learning environment. Often in schools, you'll see a mural. Might somebody go, oh, it's just a mural or something beautiful in school. No, it's more than that. And seeing yourself and your community represented in our schools. And that's, of course, going down to the pedagogical core. I'm just going to highlight just a couple of little things. Pedagogical core, when we think of that, what are we teaching in our classrooms? How do we ensure that the having Indigenous worldviews perspectives are not just we have National Indigenous Peoples Day tomorrow, but we have it, I feel we have all month as well, but it's every day. And we don't want to just have one event at the end of the year and, September, we now have the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So that's another day. So it shouldn't be just in these particular days. It should be embedded in everything we do. There's always an Indigenous author, an Indigenous leader, somebody who has guided our way in many of the content areas and all the core areas that we do. So that's our part in that. It's working alongside educators in all the facets, whether it's a principal, a district staff, senior management, of how do we help find the information that someone might need or provide that protocol and guidance as we need. The learning profile, that's digging into what our students, who they are as individuals. How do we understand who they are and what their particular needs and interests are? So there's many ways we do that in partnership with the schools and other people within the district. Again, understanding how they're progressing through our schools. And if we see a barrier, how do we change that for a student or get rid of it completely? If making sure that if there's supports or structures or resources that need to be in place, that we do so together so that we're not just waiting until somebody is not successful. And then again, working with governance. Governance is also working with our board of trustees, but also just in our sense of our commitment. We have an Indigenous Education Advisory Council that works hard for the district, providing information and guidance into everything I do, and that shifts down to all of the staff as well. So there's lots of ways that we are already doing things in here, But this is an area of focus so that everyone in the district is watching for these particular things to say, how are we doing this? Are there barriers? Are there biases? Are there things in the way to make sure that students graduate? And they have absolute dignity and grace as they walk through every one of our grades, from the little ones that are coming in at K and to the time that they graduate. And again, we want to celebrate that our graduation rates are going up. Our different things are increasing. We have some work still to do, but I feel really strong in the belief of we have a committed district. We have committed people in all aspects of our district, with teachers, support staff, our senior management, everyone has the ability to, look at what they're doing and shift, perhaps looking at it slightly different. And I feel the commitment, and then the trustees, again, I appreciate the opportunity that you allowed me to have earlier. It's probably why they were a little bit late, because once you get me started talking on these things, it's hard to keep it quiet. But we do a lot of great things. And then I'm going to just slowly turn it over to what I know about being in a leadership role, is that it's time to get out of the way, to bring forward people that are actually in the classrooms doing great work, and to really get to hear from them, to hear some of the examples of what they do on a daily basis. And my work is easier because of people like Cash and Jillian, so I'll let them introduce themselves. But again, I'll just say my merci and thank you. Good.
I'm Cash. I work as the transition teacher in the district. And I'm very fortunate
How to make that bigger.
Brave.
Can you make that? Sorry, can you make that bigger?
to share with you.
Can you slide it across the bottom?
Also, thanks, Deb, for encouraging us to come. It's really hard for me and Jillian to be in a space like this, so. But it's nice to be able to share the really cool work that we are doing. One thing I really love about my work is that I get to partner with Jillian. And we get to do some really engaging opportunities with cultural learning in the district. So we're going to talk about what I do and what she does, and then we're going to talk about some of the projects that we've been working on together. I'm up first, and I've listed very broadly some of the ways that I support district staff and students. So I love my work. Part of my work involves working directly with Indigenous students to provide enhancement services. I connect students and teachers with community resources and services. And just to dig into some of the things on the list here, career counseling, for instance, that could be helping students navigate websites and understanding admission requirements and programs. It could be looking at prerequisites, adjusting high school timetables, looking at transferability of post-secondary courses, connecting to Indigenous advisors and navigators. It really could be a lot more than that as well, depending on what the student's goals and needs are. Often it ends up, I end up connecting students with funding opportunities and sponsorship options and helping with scholarship and applications. And I'm going to pass over to Jillian.
I'm Jillian. A lot of Cash's work involves enhancing students' learning and services, while my work tends to focus more on collaborating with teachers to explore reconciliation through a lens of building capacity for greater equity. Collaboration is a key piece of my work. I collaborate with teachers to share resource kits and resources, create co-teaching opportunities, and offer teacher mentorships with lessons and critical resource review. An example of what this looks like is when I worked with the Department of Fishery and Oceans and the middle school science teachers to incorporate Indigenous content into their lessons. When we visited Willow Creek, I was able to give pieces of background of the area relevant to salmon and the viability of salmon habitat based on what I had learned from Weewakai. One of the goals of my work with teachers is to connect teachers with local nations, resources, and knowledge keepers in order for them to be able to ground their work with Indigenous ways of walking in the world. This really As teachers in the province of BC, we are guided by professional standards. Professional Standard 9 sends a strong and positive message that every educator has an important role to play in creating pedagogy that responds to the needs of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit learners, families, and communities. Supported by the Indigenous Ed Department, this year, Cash and I engaged in a number of projects with teachers where our work intersects. We applied for grants to bring hands-on cultural learning opportunities into classrooms throughout the district. My work focused on collaborating with teachers to create lessons for before and after bringing a knowledge keeper into the classroom, whereas Cash's work was focused to create awareness for hands-on skills and trades to be viewed from a cultural perspective.
So we're gonna share some of the opportunities with you. And just to give you the background, in 2021, I reached out to Indigenous Skills. I had heard about the Indigenous focused hands-on trades exposure workshops that they had been doing throughout the province. And once I got to know about the many amazing opportunities that they have available, I brought Jillian in to support me to get the projects into the classrooms in a good way. So we started with paddle pendants and go like this, and they will, so we brought, and we work with local artists and knowledge keepers to share the teachings through the cultural significance of the paddles, as well as the art and cedar, and to talk about tribal journeys. Through Indigenous Skills, we were also able to access workshops to create cedar rattle pendants, and cedar rattles, and bent wood boxes. So we don't. Oh, we do have a bent box similar to this. Similar to that. That's not the one. Indigenous Skills is funded through the Construction Foundation of BC, and because we really liked the projects that they had, we looked at other agencies that work with the Construction Foundation, and we were able to connect with Skills Ready and All Roads to do copper bracelet workshops as well. So we wanted to highlight specifically one or two of those projects in more depth for you and how those developed in our district.
So Indigenous Skills. Okay, so Indigenous Skills offer training for local teachers and artists for how to deliver an in-class workshop on creating bentwood boxes. Started like this, yes, and it end up similar. To facilitate this workshop, Indigenous Skills brought Squamish artist Peter Wayne Gong. We invited local artists and teachers to work with Peter and the Indigenous Skills team to learn how to bring these workshops into classrooms. If the class is learning about bending wood, bentwood boxes are part of the series of lessons to teach that skill. Other lessons can include watching the Mungo Martin documentary of traditional ways of creating a bentwood box. Joel Good from Snuneymuxw, his time-lapse video about creating a bentwood box using today's technology and tools, discussions about different types of wood and their malleability, learning about cedar, the tree of life, and the importance of cedar in local cultures, a math lesson, creating bentwood boxes with cardboard, learning about the different types of cuts that will allow wood bending, and will include a visit from a local elder or knowledge keeper to teach the cultural connections of bentwood boxes in local culture. This project now runs regularly in classrooms, supported by local artist Will Henderson and facilitated by Brianne Gale. Other teachers have worked with local artists and knowledge keepers to bring teachings of bentwood boxes into other classrooms also. It's important to note that this workshop and none of the other workshops occur without a local artist or knowledge keeper teaching the cultural significance, either of the bentwood box or cedar or.
So another project that was significant this year was the paddle pendant project at Cedar Elementary. With a grant from Art Starts and guided by Quaisam, every student in Cedar was able to create a paddle pendant. So it would end up looking more like that with the painting and the sinew around it. Grade 5s were also able to create large paddles for graduation, and students were able to learn drumming and drum with choir. The intent of the project was to integrate Indigenous teachings regarding paddles and tribal journeys into the classroom at Cedar Elementary. Our hope is to bring this project to Penfield through a grant that we've applied for next year. So just to wrap up, we just want to say how grateful we are to be able to be part of a team that works that really supports this kind of work. And we're thankful to the community partners that we work with, in particular, the Construction Foundation, ArtStarts, Skilled Trades BC, and especially the artists and the knowledge keepers who have walked beside us and taught us and encouraged us during the projects. We really look forward to doing more next year. Let's just
Right. Before they leave, I just want to say, you know, I know they're very modest and humble individuals. I did a little, like I track I track everything. But we have, with the work that they've done and others in our department, there's over 500 connections of our work working alongside teachers and in schools, as well as there's 20 projects just for this year, large scale projects with murals and the pendants and all of these pieces. So we have almost every school has a drum set as well. So a lot of great work is happening. And again, I can't do my job without good people like themselves. So again, I thank you for your time and I thank each of you for all the good things you do.
Not to be too redundant, but I just wanted to echo some sentiment there. I think it's evident that both you, Patch, and Jillian are so used to supporting behind the scenes and having everybody else in the spotlight. And I appreciate you having the courage to share some of your work in that. I just wanted to share that behind the scenes, Deb also celebrates your work and your contribution. And tonight, I wanted to share the board did receive in their package the comprehensive report that you did through that student voice and that work of deliberately seeking Indigenous voice from students. So just to share that, even though you are behind the scenes, you're noticed, you're celebrated and appreciated, and I really appreciate you both being here tonight.
Nice. So on to electorate and board matters, item 12A. I just need to get myself organized here. So board self-review report update. So I mentioned in the last meeting that Gordon Lee from BCSTA we'd be meeting with him on Saturday, June 3rd to discuss the results of our annual board evaluation. Gordon did attend and all trustees were in attendance. It was a great session. It gave us a chance to really discuss our feelings around 7 key topic areas. We did highlight some pieces that we would like to improve on as a board, and it will be used to build a board growth work plan as we move forward in coming together around some of the conversations that we look to delve further into. I went off script. So on to 12. It was a positive, and you know what, and it was an honest opportunity for us to share and talk about what we'd like to learn more about. On to 12B, which is the trustee remuneration analysis.
So annually, we'll bring a report for a trustee remuneration changes to the board to vote to approve or to not approve. Now that can put the board in a very difficult situation of what and how much. So our board in the past decided in 2005 to engage a community group to determine a formula that would be really independent of the board having to pick and choose how much. That formula was adopted in 2007 and we have been using it since then. On the second page, you'll see that it's a comparative tool that will look at both the remuneration for chair, vice chair, trustee, and also utilizes headcount to determine. Our formula comes in two parts. So one is half of the consideration is the median of what those different districts pay. But then the other half breaks it down to the per student amount of this district and then applies it to our district. So if our district continues to decline and all the other districts stayed the same, there is a chance that this would recommend a reduction. But as we have experienced through the years, it usually recommends a small increase. Now this year, it actually is a significant increase than it has been in the past. Our board uses this formula, which is completely unique to the province, I believe. Some districts will, they have it in the board policy to increase by the general wage increase for unions, by CPI, and of course, inflation has been significant over the last couple of years. And that is reflected in how much some of these positions have gone up. And I didn't do a comparison, but you can see the result of that with how much the chair, vice chair, and trustee positions are increasing. A 1593 increase for the chair, 1612 for the vice chair, and 1460 for each trustee. When you add that all together, it's a net increase cost of $10,505. It is in effect July 1st, if the board chooses to proceed.
Any discussion? Any questions for Secretary Treasurer Patrick? Trustee Harper.
Has there ever been a look at whether or not that 2005 formula that was made is still relevant?
We haven't, as a board, that review has not come out. But if it were, there's various forms that could take. You could engage community members again to do the same thing to make sure that it's relevant. And probably a starting point is to find out exactly what other districts do, what models and policies they use. If the board wished, we could do that first, but before the board looking to a recommendation to re-engage community members.
No, I'm not suggesting stirring the pot this evening. I'm just wondering whether in 18 years has it ever been looked at again? No.
No.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
I'm just,
Yep,
if I
please do.
could note this, because I have not seen these for our package, but it does appear that this is still considerably lower than the average remuneration. Just wanted to declare that, because that is something I looked at comparatively to the data we have here comes from the other school districts on Vancouver Island. And we are certainly at the lower end. And so I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that.
Yes. Any other discussion?
Yeah, it's very difficult to give yourself a raise. And so what was happening was that there we would have big debates on a regular basis on how much we should increase or not, and we're into a cutback here, or we're into when we aren't giving any money out. And I think during that time period, the 18 years, we actually froze our own wages one year. I think it's healthy so that you can have good people who are running on the board. I'm not saying I'm a good person, but
I think you are.
what I am saying is that this takes a lot of the self-recrimination factor out of it, because it's okay to give yourself a raise when you're doing a lot of work that's happening. But I think it would be good to review how we're doing, and in a comparative study between us and other districts will probably not take too long if we were just to phone and find out what their numbers are, how many inmates, how many use, I'm sorry, used to run a jail. And I think it would be just to do a quick comparison in the next, before the next budget that we put forward in our place, so.
Is there a sample motion?
There is a sample motion, and just to highlight in response to, Daryl's, Trustee Higgins', conversation, we do have a comparative, but it is only island-based school districts, so we could ask the Secretary Treasurer to broaden that out, just for a better overview before next budget, I agree.
Okay.
Thank you. We have two options for, motions. The first is a positive to accept the recommendation as presented. And that reads that the board recommends an adjustment to the trustee remuneration as per the formula adopted by the board in 2005, which is reviewed on an annual basis and will take effect July 1st of the new fiscal year. Do I have a mover? Do I have a seconder? All those in favor? The motion is passed. So the motion is that the remuneration will follow the formula as per presented.
Who is this?
Oh, if I could, with just a,
So- Can we get a clarification on the seconder for that motion? We had,
Trustee Gillis.
okay.
and with, I think, as a follow-up to Trustee Hagan's point, so that's not lost, that there could be a comparison for future, the following.
Well, we can put forward a motion to get back moving on that right now, if you'd like. Would you like to put forward a motion?
Sure,
Trustee Hagan?
yeah, if we do a comparative study, that reaches a broader sector of the province. And bring it back for the board's consideration for our next decision on budget matters.
Thank you. Can I have a mover? Do you guys have that motion?
Well, that's his.
This motion, we.
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder? I'm sorry.
Just-
Trustee Gladish, all those in favor? So moved. So there are no educational issues. On to finance warrant dated March 31st, 2023. It is included in your package.
So moved.
And that the finance warrant dated March 31st, 2023 be accepted as provided, moved by Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Gillis. All those in favor? So moved. On to the capital plan application.
Yes, so we have the major capital plan applications. So this is based off of our facility plan still. That has the same projects requested as previous years. For addition to Ripple Rock, addition to Ocean Grove, and replacement of Cedar. Now, something that's new, this is on a handout. But we also have been given the opportunity in that handout to apply for the Feeding Futures Capital Infrastructure Program to help us basically deliver the program. So it's still really early, but we're asking for delivery vehicle as well as kitchen upgrades. There's going to be two intakes. One is June 30th next week. That will allow us to get funding in place for next year. The September 30th application deadline actually doesn't allow us to receive the money until the next year. So, so this is a little bit of a different program. It's not a major capital, which is why it's not part of the other one, but it is part of their capital program module to submit. So I'd like to include that as a separate submission at the same time. For the Feeding Futures program.
If I may, Kevin, just a quick question about that. So will that be targeted funding that can only be used towards kitchen upgrades or in support of the Community Futures food funding program?
Yeah.
Any questions on the submission for the capital plan? Just want to highlight that again, Cedar Elementary replacement is here as a category 1. How many years have we applied for Cedar Elementary replacement?
So we did take a look today because it has been on, but we had applied for it about 5 years ago. 1 year, we took a different approach where we split it into like seismic type upgrades and took a different approach, but then put it back on as a request for full replacement the next year. So it has was identified very, like, years ago, but by the time we had all our paperwork and design and cost estimates in place, it's been on for about 5 years.
Just wanted to highlight that. It's getting more expensive every single year.
I have a limit when I have to be at.
Okay, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just read the board, I'll just read the motion really quick, that the board approve the 2023 capital plan submission as outlined in the summary provided by Secretary and Treasurer Patrick. The mover, trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Gladish. All those in favor? And
Thank
have a
you.
good evening, trustee
All
Hagan.
right,
Thank you for your participation.
All right.
Have a great summer. This. Yeah. This is the last one.
June 20th.
You'll need a motion. Oh, part of that, okay, yeah.
Just
So much fun, let's keep going.
to draw us back, folks, we only have a few more items on the public board meeting agenda, which has been mentioned is the last public agenda meeting of 2023-2022. So on to committee reports. So Superintendent Student Leadership Committee of June 8, trustee Briggs.
Our last meeting of the year, with the Student Leadership Committee, we had a record of 13 students attending. Superintendent Morrow, Executive Assistant Kasha, Associate Principal Stephen Hawkins-Bogle, Trustee McMahon, and myself. Jeremy took us on a field trip all the way to the front steps of the board office. Asked the students their opinion regarding the installation of a rainbow piece on the visible front of the board office. Which was nice to see as we rolled up to our meeting. This was followed by a discussion about safety and belonging and a lengthy discussion about future topics, with some of the themes being communication, standardization of grading, educating versus banning, neurodivergency, connecting our schools versus school rivals, accessibility and accommodations, how to get strategic plan feedback from students, and more education surrounding mental illness. And we greatly appreciate the time students are dedicating to these meetings, and I look forward to seeing this group continue to grow and develop.
And the wider range of topics that were brought forward through student voice
All student-led topics.
is amazing. Like, what a great resource and reason to continue the student leadership group. Thanks for your work. On to the QP board liaison meeting of June 8th. So on June 8th, we met for the annual check-in with QP Local 723. We discussed topics regarding childcare, staff recruitment, retention, and professional development for QP membership. I do always look forward to these liaison meetings. I love touching base with our staff through their QP, through their union representatives, but our staff in general. So thank you for your time, QP, and we look forward to seeing you next year. And on to. I look forward to coming back next year. CRDTA liaison meeting, trustee Gills.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to again meet with Deborah Coombs and two representatives, Superintendent Morrow and yourself and myself. And I just like to say that it's a pleasure to be able to work with a collaborative team. I would say that we were looking forward to working together, and these were primarily focused on social justice issues, or social justice questions, maybe would be a better way of phrasing it. We talked about the process for ensuring topics that are raised have a timely and appropriate response. And often recognizing that many of these are in the area of operational procedures, but certainly encouraging people to always seek further information if they don't feel they have been responded to in a timely manner. There were some questions around school naming policies, kind of taking a look at possibly changing times and whether or not there might be some appropriate name changes in schools, and asking us to look at a model used in New Westminster. And then Looking ahead primarily to next year, we have this wonderful, I guess we can call it mural that celebrates June as Pride Month, but also talking about a way for schools to be able to align their support through a pride flag. And then we talked also about ensuring that signage is available for gender neutral washrooms. I believe there is some signage, but sometimes we might need to highlight where that signage is or make sure that it's in a more visible place. And then began by looking at possibly some of the policies they'd like us to explore further. The Indigenous Education Policy 25, which raised questions around some of our policies. I know we have a lot of policies that we're currently looking at and saying, are these appropriate for this time? And I know some very thoughtful work has been done fairly recently by previous board members and current board members, but always a recognition that these are organic policies that have to reflect the time. So again, just it's always a pleasure to meet with the group because I feel like there's a sense of us bringing things to each other's attention and that will help us work with those a greater sense of intentionality and purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gillis. And with that, we will move on to any other business. Seeing none, is there any questions from online or present in the current meeting?
No, there are no online questions.
Okay. Valerie's okay? Deborah?
Two questions with the board's indulgence. The formula that's referred to in the remuneration analysis, I noticed that the analysis is there, but not the actual formula. Is that something that is public or is that something that's done?
It can be public. If you're good at digging in, you can tell from that sheet what the formulas are. But yeah, it's in Excel. You have to go pull each cell out from. I could put it into a sort of an email type format to share, if the board would like.
No problem with that.
Certainly, yeah.
The second question is in the capital plan application. The second item that you referred to around the community future submission, I don't think it was in our package.
No, it wasn't. It's, yeah, it's. We had to enter it on the minor capital side and I unfortunately didn't print it off in time for the agenda submission, but I was hoping that a description, verbal description would suffice. It's $100,000 for a delivery van and kitchen upgrades.
Thank you.
And it really is just one line that kind of describes exactly that. Sure.
Sorry, I just didn't, it wasn't clear when the presentation was going on, so thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Harper, so moved.